Okay, so welcome to a master class on detoxification. What I'd like to talk about tonight is the concept of toxins in the environment, what they are, how they get into our bodies, what they actually do to us. And as a biochemist, I'll be a little reductionist, trying to get into exactly how these toxins interact with biomolecules, proteins, tissue, and things like that. And then I'll talk about the things we really need to know. How do you avoid toxic exposure? How do you mitigate the risk of toxic exposure? And how do you actively detoxify? And of course, that leads me right into the concept of zeolites, the history of the use of zeolites, and why the Daily Detox Plus is the product it is, the best zeolite product in the market. My name is Rik Deitsch. I'm a biochemist. I've conducted drug research for the last 25 years, as well as dietary supplement research. I worked for large companies and formulated well over 50 different dietary supplements. It resulted in literally hundreds of millions of dollars in sales of those products. And now I'm really, really happy to bring my expertise, the knowledge, the background, the network I have to Navan Global and do whatever I can to make sure that the distributors of Navan have the absolute best products that they can possibly have. So with that, let's start talking about the concept of detoxification. And the first question I have to ask is the question I ask pretty much everybody who hasn't had this lecture before, and that's very simple. Are you toxic? And I ask this, it's a little tongue-in-cheek because I realize that most of the distributors in Navan are pretty educated as far as wellness goes, and they realize that there are toxins in the environment. But I've given lectures like this. I've given speeches and live presentations and continuing education courses for physicians where there were people that actually thought that they weren't toxic. I have a slide that I use sometimes that shows a farmer in a field in South Dakota, and this particular guy actually told me, I live in a pristine environment, there are no toxins in me. And as he was saying this, there was a crop duster flying behind him in the field, dusting the plants. So the fact is, there's no place on the planet that is pristine. There's no place on the planet that doesn't have natural and man-made toxins that can cause disease and dysfunction. You have to understand, even if the toxins are created in factories in China, there's a jet stream that goes all the way around the world. So wherever the wind blows, wherever the water flows, toxins are there. We've taken deep ice cores in Antarctica and found in the deep ice of Antarctica man-made toxins, carcinogens, potential cancer-causing chemicals. So we know that there's no place on Earth that is pristine, and we're always going to be bombarded with toxins. But where do they actually come from? Well, I mean, your food, for one, especially hormones and pesticides. And people do talk about the concept of organic fruits and vegetables, organic meats. And to call something organic means it must be grown free of pesticides, herbicides, and genetic modification. That's the definition of organic to get an organic certification. The problem is that even if one farm is growing organic foods, the farm next door might not be organic, and the air blows and the water flows. And a study done about 6 years ago by the FDA looked at over 800 stores, grocery stores, fruit stores, and matched the organic fruits and vegetables in the same store against the non-organic or regular fruits and vegetables. And they found a lot more herbicides and pesticides in the foods marked organic. So that's something you should look for. Understand that the reason for that probably is because the food that is not marked organic can be washed, usually chemical baths, and it gets all that stuff off, whereas the organic fruits and vegetables cannot be. Additionally, there's hormones in chicken and beef and things like that, so they grow faster and bigger. That's a form of environmental toxicity because those hormones can cause all sorts of problems in our body as well. We have our food, but we also have our air and our water. And obviously, automobile exhaust is lower and lower in lead particles over the years, but still has it. Cigarette smoke, heavy metals that come from manufacturing and industry. People don't understand this, but cigarette smoke, secondhand smoke can actually be more dangerous in some instances than primary smoke. For example, cadmium is trapped. It's actually coordinated in primary smoke. So when smokers breathe it in, the cadmium isn't free to interact in the body. They breathe out, that cadmium then becomes free. And secondhand smoke has a lot more cadmium in it, or available cadmium, than primary smoke. And cadmium is a heavy metal and is highly carcinogenic, is cancer causing. So we talk about secondary smoke, and now they actually talk about tertiary smoke, which is cigarette smoke that gets into furniture and clothes, and it actually changes chemically over time and is a whole different type of toxicity that you can get from tertiary cigarette smoke. Versus household chemicals, cleaners, bleaches, things like that, gas and oil products or volatile organics. And I'll use that term a lot, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. And a volatile organic compound is basically an oil-soluble compound, usually a flat benzene ring structure as far as the molecule goes. And they're called volatile because they're volatile. They go from a liquid to a gas very quickly. They evaporate quickly. But because of that, they're easily absorbed through the skin. They're easily breathed in. And then we have toxic skincare products. There's lots of skincare products that have volatile organics in it, things to actually force absorption or contact with the skin and keep it on, and act as a barrier against loss of moisture. Years and years ago, when I first started talking about this stuff, not a lot of people wanted to discuss it, and they actually would fight me on what was and was not toxic and how toxic could it be for which individuals. But that's kind of changed over the years. And in fact, the National Institutes for Health has a website called Toxtown. I have the link at the bottom. It's toxtown.nln.nih. So it's the National Libraries of Medicine and the National Institutes for Health, or you can just do a search Toxtown and you'll pull it up. And it's really kind of interesting. It tells you what the toxins are around you and how they actually get into your body. But all that is really just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I'm talking about environmental exposure, things in the food, the water, the air. But I love this picture because the tip of the iceberg, if you see this iceberg, 90% of it is underwater. You don't see it. You only see the top 10%. And so the toxins we're talking about are just the ones that we really know about, that we're exposed to as we get older, but we're actually born with a lot of toxins. A study conducted back in 2004 by the Environmental Working Group, which is a public advocacy group in Washington, D.C., looked at the umbilical cord blood of newborns, and they found over 200 toxic compounds in the umbilical cord blood of newborns. Many of those are carcinogenic or cancer causing. So we're born with a lot of these toxins, and we really don't have a chance at that point because we're already overburdened and our body burden is higher than our ability to excrete. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Well, what actually happens to us when we get these toxins in our bodies, and what can our bodies handle? What can they not handle? So first, let's talk about heavy metals. And I think what's important to understand is that there are good metals. You might call them electrolytes or other charged particles, but for example, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, sodium, potassium, at low doses, copper, manganese, boron, chromium, +3 chromium, are all necessary for life. These are metals that take part in metabolic processes. They're part of metalloproteins and metalloenzymes. They help move things around the body. They help maintain the structure of some proteins and enzymes. So these are metals that are absolutely necessary for life, and we have to get them in our diet. Then you have the heavy metals, and the toxic metals like mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, tin, bismuth, aluminum, antimony. These are metals that are found in nature. They're found in the world. They're found after industrial processes. But the biggest issue, and this is the word of the day, the biggest issue is competition. The heavy metals compete for uptake and space in our body with the good metals. And in many cases, they can displace the good metals from metalloenzymes and metalloproteins, therefore slowing down or stopping normal metabolic function. And that's really what heavy metals do. They disrupt normal cell metabolism. Now, we have all sorts of ways that we detox, and I'll talk about the action of detoxification in a few minutes. But different metals tend to like to go to different places. So lead, mercury, aluminum, arsenic tends to go into fatty tissues in the brain and nervous tissue, and so they can lead to increased risk for things like Alzheimer's, ADD, autism, peripheral neuropathy. Cadmium and nickel are known to cause lung damage, increased risk for emphysema, and then chromium, cobalt, lead, mercury, carcinogens like this. Go back. Where do we find some of these things? Like I talked about the concept that a lot of these toxins are natural. Mercury, for example, is a natural toxin. The primary source of mercury in the environment is underwater volcanic eruptions. While the volcano erupts underwater, it releases tons of mercury into the sea. That mercury is taken up by plankton, by small organisms that get eaten by bigger organisms, then get eaten by fish, then get eaten by bigger fish, and the mercury will bioaccumulate in the biggest fish. And so the human source of mercury poisoning primarily is seafood, especially larger fish. So larger fish, tuna, sea bass, things like that, tend to have the most amount of mercury in it. And so you should be aware of that. It is a natural toxin, but it is a major source of mercury toxicity for people. I like to talk about arsenic because a lot of people think of arsenic as a third world toxin. It comes in well water in the third world, but arsenic is now found a lot in rice products. So we're starting now to analyze rice that's coming to the country and rice that's even grown here because rice does bioaccumulate arsenic. But a source of arsenic toxicity or arsenic exposure that a lot of people don't talk about is wood. Any wood that's used outdoors, pressure-treated wood, has arsenic chloride in it to prevent termite damage. In fact, one 2x12, which is the normal size wood for decks, like wooden decks. One of those pieces of wood has enough arsenic in it to kill 200 adults, kill 200 people. And if you go to a store and you look at Home Depot and you look at wood for this pressure treated for outdoor use, there'll be a big sign on it, and it says, "Wash hands before eating, after handling this wood. Wear protective clothing when handling this wood. Do not burn this wood." And yet we take that tag off when we build our decks and our outdoor patio furniture, and we forget that there's actually arsenic in this thing. So the warning there is, you know what? Put a tablecloth over your wooden patio furniture, over your wooden picnic table. If you're going to be playing on the wood deck, if kids are playing on the wood deck or touching it, make sure they wash their hands before they eat. Your skin is a pretty good barrier against arsenic poisoning, but if you touch the wood and then eat or rub your eyes or nose, you can get arsenic in your body. And the worst thing is with pets, dogs and cats, the number one source of arsenic toxicity for dogs and cats are chew toys on wooden decks. So they chew on the toy, it rolls around the deck, picking up arsenic, and they chew on the toy again. And so do not give chew toys to dogs and cats on a wooden deck. Right. So these are ways that you can actually reduce some of your exposure to these heavy metals. So let's talk about competition. And I'm going to give a couple of examples of metalloenzymes, metalloproteins, and metallomolecules that use metals as cofactors. So this is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So this is adenosine, which is a nitrogenous base. It's part of our DNA. It's something that's universal in our body. And we utilize several forms of this. So these are phosphate groups, 1, 2, 3 phosphates. So that's a phosphorus surrounded by oxygens. And you have adenosine monophosphate, diphosphate, or triphosphate. Now, adenosine triphosphate is the energy currency of the body. These bonds, these phosphate bonds, are incredibly negative. That's negative, negative, and more negative. And because that's 3 negatives in a row, this is a high energy bond, and it wants to pull apart. It's trying to pull apart, but it's stabilized because magnesium binds there. And in fact, active ATP is actually called magnesium ATP. So the positive charge of magnesium stabilizes the ATP. When your body needs to do something, an ATP molecule will come there. The magnesium will be released. It'll release the energy, that bond energy, and allow work to be done, metabolism to be done. And what's left is a free phosphate and adenosine diphosphate, ADP, which then can get recycled as part of the energy metabolism in our body. Now, the problem is magnesium can be displaced from ATP primarily by mercury. So if you have even a low-level mercury poisoning, the mercury can bind to ATP and inactivate it. It's basically like taking batteries out of your body. This is the energy of your body, and it's being shut down or inhibited because of mercury. So if we could actively remove the mercury, and here I have a zeolite cage, and I'll talk a little bit more about how zeolites work, but gobble, gobble, gobble will take the mercury away. So what can happen then? Magnesium can get to its binding site. And now we have active ATP. Of course, this is an oversimplification, but it's exactly what's happening. If you can remove the mercury from your body, you can have more readily available ATP, therefore more energy to conduct metabolic processes in the body. So this is one example. And then I talk about zinc finger proteins a lot because this is a really good example, especially when we talk about arsenic toxicity. So this is an example of a zinc finger protein. It's got this great little helical structure that kind of wraps around this three-dimensional structure, and it wraps around a single zinc atom. So that zinc atom coordinates the protein and lets it keep its shape. And understand that the way proteins work is by their three-dimensional shapes. They're like keys that go around and unlock doors. And the only way they can fit that lock is if the key is the right structure. So zinc finger proteins are necessary for cellular division. Anytime your cells are going to divide, zinc finger proteins will come in and help copy the DNA. So this is important when you get a cut, a scrape, a broken bone, you need to repair. But it's also important when you have a cold and you need more white blood cells, more leukocytes to fight the cold, fight the infection. This is one of the reasons that you might suck on a zinc lozenge when you have a cold or take a zinc vitamin, because that zinc gets in your body. More zinc finger proteins, more DNA to be able to copy your white blood cells to be able to fight the infection. And that's basically how it works. The problem is arsenic can displace zinc right here. And because arsenic is smaller than the zinc, the protein changes shape, it changes conformation, and it inactivates the protein. So think about what happens when you have even low-level arsenic toxicity, arsenic poisoning. You don't heal well. If you get cuts, scrapes, things like that, your immune system is suppressed. So your immune system doesn't work well. And all this is really because of displacement of zinc from zinc finger proteins. So that's the word of the day, competition. These heavy metals compete, and you wind up with dysfunction, metabolic inactivity because of the heavy metals. So let's talk about detoxification, the concept and how our bodies work. You can think of it as three different things. First, barrier elimination. Okay, so your skin is a barrier against toxic exposure. I said before, arsenic doesn't do well getting through the skin. But if you touch arsenic and then you rub your eyes, your nose, or you eat, you can get it in your body. So the skin is a pretty good barrier against toxicity. But so too is the digestive tract. And it's kind of hard for most people to understand. But as things move through your digestive tract, for all practical purposes, they're not in your body. Until they get absorbed from the digestive tract into your bloodstream, they can be eliminated through the digestive tract. Basically, you poop it out. And your digestive tract is another barrier to absorption, and then you have elimination through the digestive tract, through fecal matter. And lots of toxins are never either to ingest, never get into your body, they get eliminated. But if a toxin does get in, what do? Well, we have lots and lots and lots of ways in our body to eliminate toxins, to excrete toxins, primarily through fecal matter and through urine, but also a little through sweat and even uptake into the hair and removal through hair growth. But primarily it's going to be through urination and elimination through the fecal matter. Now, how does it get there? Well, you have different mechanisms with the kidneys and the liver for what's called transformation, to take those toxins, transform them chemically so they become inert and usually water soluble. So they can be eliminated, as I said, through the urine or through the fecal matter. And there's lots and lots of different transformation pathways. My favorite, and I've talked about this before, is phase 2 human glucuronidation, which is the liver transformation pathway to get rid of excess hormones in the body. So if you have excess hormones, whether it's from a disease, dysfunction, you're ingesting them, xenoestrogens from plastics, for example, act as hormones in the body. They act, and the liver treats them as excess hormones. And so for the body to balance those, the liver has to transform them through this process of phase 2 human glucuronidation. And the cool part about that is there's things we can do to improve human glucuronidation. For example, if we get selenium in our diet, that helps the liver. A little bit of copper helps the liver. To remove certain toxins that can inhibit certain heavy metals that inhibit that process. But also deglucarate, which is found in the skins of citrus fruits like oranges, lemons, and limes. Deglucarate spikes or increase the activity of human glucuronidation. So if you've ever seen a product with glucaric acid or deglucarate, potassium or calcium deglucarate, that's what it's for. It improves liver function, especially in balancing excess hormones. So that's transformation. Now, understand, all of us have these different transformation pathways. The problem is some of us are better at it than others. Some of us are good excretors and some of us are poor excretors. And it winds up that people that say they're very toxic or things like that tend to have simply poor transformation and poor excretion. Now, it could be genetic, it could be something they're born with, or it could be that what they've been exposed to over time has reduced function in the liver and the kidneys and the lymph. And so that's inhibiting their transformation pathways. And that can be corrected over time with a healthful diet, exercise, and healthy detoxification. Now, if you're not able to prevent the toxin from getting in, eliminating right away, or transforming it, the only thing left for the body to do is what's called sequestration, hiding the toxin. What the body is trying to do is keep the toxin out of circulation so it can do less damage. And so it sequesters it. And different toxins go in different places. As I said before, mercury, for example, loves the fatty tissue around the nerves. So it sits in the brain, in the fatty part of the brain, and in the myelin sheaths, the insulation around the nerve. Lead loves to go in a bone. It displaces calcium and gets stored in the bone. Basically, especially heavy metals, but also volatile organic compounds, tend to get sequestered in metabolically inert or inactive tissue, primarily fat, bone, and even in some cases, deep muscle. It's interesting because there's some work that was done recently by one of my partners, Dr. Stuart Lonke, and he wrote a book called Toxic Obesity. And the concept there, he found that if you were highly toxic, the fat that was storing those toxins in your body was defending itself. It was less labile and harder to break down than fat that didn't have toxins in it. So if you start detoxifying, you start removing those toxins from the body and then removing those toxins from the fat, that fat becomes more labile and easier to break down. So over time, healthy detoxification can lead to healthy weight loss, which is a downstream implication of a cleaner, healthier body. So now we have a body burden. We have all these toxins built up in our body. How do we decrease our body burden? How do we clean it out? And there's lots and lots and lots of ways to clean out your body. Primarily, as I said, it's how do you waste? How do you urinate? How do you go to the bathroom? How do you poop? How do you sweat? And so things like infrared saunas, lymphatic drainage, colon cleansing, but then there's things like energetic body work and acupuncture. And then there's use of electromagnetic to increase blood flow, homeopathic products, vitamins, herbs. There's glutathione for liver support, chlorella and algae primarily are digestive detoxifiers, and there's chelation. So let's talk about the issues with some of these things. Whenever you're doing a wasting concept for detoxification, it always leads to dehydration. So you have to make sure you're drinking plenty of water whenever you're doing any of these detoxes. Some of them can be physically addictive. Diuretics and laxatives, even natural ones like dandelion root is used as a mild diuretic. Senna is used as a laxative. They can be physically addictive over time where the body needs them to be able to waste water and to be able to go to the bathroom. Especially things like senna-based teas. There's nothing wrong with having a cup of senna tea once, twice a week. That's fine, and it does help you eliminate, does help you go to the bathroom. The problem is that if you take it too much, your body gets used to it and cannot function normally without it. And so it kind of shuts down peristalsis, which is the muscular contraction through the digestive tract that allows for normal elimination. And what happens is you wind up with these, there's actually a condition called encopresis, which is uniquely, almost always, from people that have been using senna-based teas. And it's a series of painful constipation and then explosive diarrhea, getting rid of these things in the digestive tract because your body's not functioning normally. So you should be careful with used laxative diuretics, even the natural ones, because there can be downstream implications and issues. When we start talking about specific detoxification, like heavy metals, that's where chelation comes in. And chelation is actually a Greek, it means claw. And if you saw chelators, molecular chelators, they actually kind of look like claws, like a hand. And it's a claw, has a negative charge. So it goes around and captures things with a positive charge and gets them out of your body. The number one used chelator is EDTA. EDTA became really popular during World War II. because a lot of soldiers were painting boats with lead paint, and they were working in motor pools with lead acid batteries. And so there was a lot of lead poisoning in World War II. And so they started doing IV EDTA chelation to pull the lead out. So lead has a positive, a +2 charge. And the problem with chelation is it's only charge specific. So EDTA will look for anything with a +2 charge. So pull out lead, but also pull out magnesium and calcium, which we need to live. And so you wind up with diminishing returns, where the more you're chelating, you do get some lead, but you're now removing good stuff. So you have to add back the calcium magnesium as an example, and you keep adding calcium magnesium that you're chelating out. So it's not specific enough to be able to really detoxify. Additionally, you need a lot of it to be useful, and that load can be very hard in the kidneys and the bladder. And so people with kidney dysfunction or any kidney issues cannot undergo chelation like that. And then lastly, almost all these chelators are by IV. So you have to get an injection, get an IV therapy. So we'd recommend doing something that's not IV and is much easier to use. Okay, so a new approach to the concept of chelation is this use of zeolites. So I'm going to tell you basically what zeolites are and where they come from, and they're not truly chelators and what they call clathrators, but they do use charge and size to remove toxins from the body, and they do it safely and effectively. So zeolites are primarily volcanic ash. When lava goes into water, especially salt water, the high temperature, high heat, the pressure forms these crystal structures, these cage-like structures that are zeolites. And they're formed over thousands of years. The zeolites that we use have GRAS status, generally recognized as safe from the FDA, and they're considered very good for the removal of metal ions. But zeolites are used as filters. They're used as molecular sieves for separation of certain things, depending on which zeolite you use. As I said, it's a three-dimensional cage-like structure that has a net negative charge. It's one of the few negatively charged minerals found in nature. Because of its cage-like structure and negative charge, zeolites have the ability to draw to themselves, trap within themselves, a variety of positively charged compounds. Now, different zeolites do different things and trap different things. So it's important to know that there's a lot of different types of zeolites. There's actually 49 naturally occurring zeolites, and they're divided by families based on their cage-like structure, the crystals they form. For example, there are zeolites that form needles or pins. They're called acular needle-like zeolites. And one example here is scolecite. And I'm bringing this up because you're going to look up zeolites or zeolites in health or zeolites in cancer, and you're saying, wow, zeolites cause cancer, because you're going to find that asbestos is a needle-like zeolite. And when you breathe it in, the needles, the pins stick in the lungs and can increase risk for mesothelioma, a form of cancer. And certainly, we don't use needle-like zeolites, and we certainly don't have any zeolite that you're breathing in. But our type of zeolite, even if you breathe it in, it wouldn't hurt you. Okay? So another family of zeolites are the equant or grape-like zeolites. And here's an example of chabazite. And there's a lot of uses for those. If you ever had a salt lamp, it's like one of... actually, it's a scolecite lamp. But basically, it's right there behind me. It's a zeolite rock, and you put like a light bulb in it, which heats it up, and it sucks up odors from the air, positively charged ions that cause odor in the air, and deodorizes the room and detoxifies the room. So that's the use of chabazite. And then there's sheet-like zeolites. And sheet-like zeolites form pleated sheets that are easy to break down, and they're considered completely safe and non-toxic. They don't form pins, so even if you breathe them in, they don't hurt you. And we specifically use a sheet-like zeolite called clinoptilolite. And clinoptilolite has a long history. It's been used for over 800 years in traditional medicine. In fact, there's people in India and the subcontinent called geophasics, clay eaters, and they've actually been eating clinoptilolite as part of their diet for 800 years. It's highly abundant, it's safe and non-toxic, and the coolest thing is because of its structure, it has a really high affinity for toxic metals and a really low affinity for the good metals, as I discussed the difference before. I said here are the pros. And like I said, it's highly abundant. It's been used in animal feed, water filtration. It's been used for years and years. So it's considered to be completely safe and non-toxic. But there are problems with it. You look at the cons. Natural clinoptilolite is kind of a rough, grainy sand when you pull it from the mine site. And even if you try to do normal methods of breaking it down, chalcination, you can only get it down to, 10 microns, 5 microns sometimes. But the rough granular form you get from the mine site is usually greater than 40 microns, like a rough, grainy sand. That's way too big to be absorbed from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. So most clinoptilolite that you're going to find out there in products is basically the zeolite from the mine site. They put a scoop in it and they say, is it going to detox? And it's just going to go through your digestive tract. And of course, there's a use for that. There's lots of products, activated charcoals and fibers that can clean out your digestive tract, and that would do it as well. But if you want a systemic detoxifier, you need to have a smaller cage size to be able to be absorbed from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. Additionally, the zeolite you get from the mine site is dirty. It's full of toxins. There was a product in the 70s that was a zeolite product called Detox that the FDA pulled off the market because it had a lot of mercury in it, and they thought that was dangerous. The fact is, zeolites are nature's filters. When you have a zeolite mine site and water flows through it and air blows over it, it's sucking up toxins all the time from the air and the water. And because of that, the stuff that when you get the mine zeolite, it's full of all these toxins. Now, the zeolite is considered to be safe and non-toxic, has GRAS status. But that means that it's so good at holding on to those toxins, it's not exchanging those back into the body when you ingest it. But if the cage is already full of high affinity toxins that are going to hold on to, how much good could it do in the body? It has a lack of usable surface area. It's almost like the dirty sponge. You can't clean your counter with a dirty sponge. You got to clean it out first so it can hold dirt, hold more things. And so these were the biggest issues we found with natural mined clinoptilolite. Now, clinoptilolite is highly abundant. Here's a zeolite mine site that we use, and these are people down here, so you can see how much there is. This one mine site has over 300 million tons of clinoptilolite zeolite. So there's lots and lots and lots of it. I want you guys to know you can sell as much daily Detox Plus as you want. We're not going to run out of clinoptilolite. There's plenty. So I want to get that through to you. So this is the three-dimensional structure of clinoptilolite, and it's repeating 10-sided and 8-sided pores. And I want to get this through to you because specifically there's some companies that make ridiculous claims, and I want to try and explain why they're ridiculous claims. So you can see this is a 10-sided ring and an 8-sided ring, and it repeats 10-sided, 8-sided, 10-sided, 8-sided, this way, 8-sided, 10-sided, 8-sided, 10-sided. So it's repeating 8-sided and 10-sided rings. The 10-sided ring has a size of 7.5 angstroms by 4.2 angstroms, and the smaller pores are 4.2 by 4.2 angstroms. So that tells you the size, and that tells you what can and cannot get into those pores based on pore sizes. 1 angstrom is 10 angstroms or 1 nanometer. This would be 0.75 angstroms would be one pore. And that's important because there's actually a company out there that says they're better than our stuff because they micronize their zeolite so small, it's 0.9 nanometers. That's the size of one of these pores. That will be one of these pores, which means they don't understand how zeolites work. They don't understand what a cage-like structure is. They don't understand that needs, the depth and the internal structure to be able to pull in and hold on to these toxins. So it's a ridiculous claim that clearly shows they don't understand what these zeolites are. And they don't understand how they work. I want to show you cation exchange because we're going to talk about what does and does not fit into the zeolite. And what I want to get across to you is that the good metals can get into the zeolite. The zeolite doesn't like them. They're not high affinity metals, so it doesn't hold on to them. It likes smaller, higher charged metals. So here's a lead coming in, and it kicks out the potassium. Here's a mercury coming in, kicks out the calcium. Here's an ammonium coming in, kicks out the sodium. Arsenic comes in and kicks out the sodium, and calcium moves over. So this cationic exchange will occur over and over and over again until the zeolite is full of high affinity metals like mercury, lead, cadmium, tin, bismuth, aluminum, antimony. Once the zeolite is full, where it has a net neutral charge across the surface, It simply gets removed through the kidneys and the bladder, and you urinate it out. And we have measured in clinical study a great increase in the urination of heavy metals when using the product. So just to see how big this stuff is, these are the average van der Waal radii of the different metals. And you can see that metals that are bad for us tend to be smaller with a higher charge, and metals that are good for us tend to be larger with a lower charge. So the higher the charge and the smaller the atom, the greater the affinity for the zeolite. This kind of shows a little bit about the affinity scale and reactivity scale. And see, the deeper, the smaller atom can get deeper and deeper into the zeolite pore structure, into the cage, and have more points of coordination. More of it can touch the cage and be held on to the negative charge. Things like calcium and potassium are just too big to be trapped. And I told you before, we have measured increase in urinary excretion of heavy metals. For example, our clinical study that was published in a peer-reviewed journal saw a 5 to 7-fold increase in urinary excretion of heavy metals within a week in normal or healthy individuals. We also did a study in West Virginia coal miners and saw as much as a 15-fold increase in heavy metal excretion. Of course, they work in a highly toxic environment, so there's much more toxins to pull out of there. Now, I talked about heavy metals, but let's talk about volatile organic compounds for a bit. When I was first studying zeolites back in the 90s, a lot of people were talking to me about removing volatile organic compounds, and I was a little skeptical because they're too big. They're much too big to fit inside the zeolite. And it didn't make sense to me that the zeolite would be able to remove volatile organic compounds. But when we got zeolite from the mine site and we did our activation process, we found a lot of volatile organic compounds in that zeolite. So clearly, it was holding on to volatile organic compounds. So we digging through the literature, I found this one article that was published in the journal Actic Crystallography in 1996. And this is really interesting. This shows 2 zeolite cages. This is one and this is one. And that shows benzene rings coordinating with the cages. So the benzene rings of benzene is a volatile organic compound, and all volatile organic compounds have this sort of flat structure, this benzene structure. And you see that dotted line in the middle? That's shared electrons. There's 3 extra electrons that are shared among these 6 carbon atoms. And it gives it a kind of negative charge that's shared among these ions. But it's flat and can lay against the zeolite. When it lays against the flat side of the zeolite, it starts to share these electrons into the zeolite structure and take on a slight positive charge, which draws another zeolite cage to the other side of it, in essence making a toxic sandwich or a toxic Oreo. And it's really a very fascinating way to trap the volatile organic compounds. Now, here's what's interesting. It's because it's flat that the benzene ring, the volatile organic compounds, can be trapped by the zeolite. The question is there anything good for us, anything healthy for us that has that flat structure? And the answer is no. It's that flat structure that makes these things so dangerous. Because they're flat, they can slide through our cell membranes. Because they're flat, they can intercalate. They actually slide between the curves of our double helix in our DNA. They slide between turns, intercalating and trapping themselves inside the DNA, which causes mutations and causes cancer. So it's the flat structure of the volatile organic compounds that make them so dangerous, but that is the property that makes them so easy to be trapped by the zeolite. I love that. I love that what's so bad about them is what makes it so easy for the zeolite to pull them out. So it's very apropos. So let's talk about our stuff, and what makes it so different. As I said, I started working in zeolites in the mid-90s, and I saw the problems. I saw the cons, that the clinoptilolite was too big and too dirty. So I started working in a process that we perfected over the years that we call micronization and activation. Understand this. When I launched my first zeolite product in 2005, there was nothing else in the market. There was a drug for diarrhea called Estefan that was sold in Cuba. But that was basically it. And there were a couple of products that had zeolite powder for humans for digestive detoxification. But nobody was doing what I was doing. I coined the terms micronization activation, and now everybody's using it. So if you look at some of the competitors out there, they use all of my published data, they use my research, and they use my marketing material that I've created over the years. And none of them are doing this right. And I'll talk a little bit about the competition and what they're doing as well. So let's start with micronization. As I said, when the zeolite comes from the mine site, it's big, it's huge. It can be 40 to 200 microns, which is a rough grain. You need a product, you need powders to be less than 5 microns to be absorbed from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. The smaller, the better. Uh, Most drugs that are oral drugs that are meant to be absorbed have to be less than 2 microns for easy absorption. So we start with the raw zeolite, and we use a process that's high speed, high pressure, and centrifugation to crush the zeolite over and over and over again to get it as small as possible, certainly less than 5 microns, but our average particle size is actually less than 1 micron, and our smallest measured particles are 0.49 microns or 490 nanometers, which is certainly small enough to be able to get from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. And we have published clinical data that shows an increase in heavy metal excretion and capture of the zeolite in the urine. And the only way you can eat this and then capture the urine is if it gets in your body. There's no route from the digestive tract to urinary excretion without going through the blood, the lymph, the kidneys, and the bladder, and then out. So it proves that the zeolite is well absorbed as it gets through the body, absorbs toxins, and then it's excreted. And I want to point this out. When I first started talking about micronizing the zeolite, crushing the zeolite cages, we got derided by people that didn't understand the science. And they said we were destroying the zeolite. We're crushing it to non-existence and liberating the atoms that make up the zeolite. And the answer is no, we're not. The zeolite, the clinoptilite, is incredibly stable, formed in this high heat and pressure in a volcanic eruption. It's really, really, really hard to break down a zeolite to its constituent atoms. Clinoptilite can exist at over 800 degrees for over 10 hours. It's amphoteric, so it exists just as well in acid or base. It also doesn't even change size. What differentiates zeolites from clays, for example, is when clays get wet, they swell. Zeolites don't swell. They're a rigid structure, so they don't swell up. So incredibly stable. So when we micronize it, we're not destroying the zeolite. We're just crushing it so there's smaller cages. So the best example I can give is a diamond. We know the diamond is one of the hardest substances on earth, but you can crush a diamond. You can cut a diamond. And when you cut it, it cuts along the crystal structure of the cage-like structure, and you wind up with smaller diamonds. Even when you crush a diamond to dust, every piece of diamond dust is still a diamond. With the carbon structure of the diamond, with all the properties of the diamond, it's just a tiny, tiny diamond. And that's what we do here. We crush the zeolite over and over again, so we have tiny little cages that can now get into your body, travel through the blood and lymph, and pull toxins out of your body. Now, after we micronize it, it needs to be activated, basically cleaned out. And we do that with heat and natural acids. And this is very important because when the zeolite is full from the mine site, there's not that much you can pull up. There's not a lot of useful surface area. So we start by heating it up in ultra purified water. And this is interesting. So I asked when I used to teach college chemistry, I would ask students, when you boil water and smoke comes off first, before the water boils, smoke comes off, what is that smoke? And they're confused. They can't answer the question, but it's basically trapped gas. Every water, everything has trapped gases in it. And when you heat it up, the first thing that comes out before you boil are the gases that were trapped in it. Well, with the zeolite, it's volatile organic compounds. So the first thing is to come off an off gas. And so that's important to get those out of there. And as I said, they're called volatile because they go into air pretty readily, pretty easily. So we used to, when we first started using this one mine site, we had an apparatus here of the top of the reaction vessel that would capture the gases that they came off and analyze them. And this was really interesting because one of the things we captured, we couldn't analyze, we couldn't identify. So we sent it off to a third-party laboratory, and it came back as diesel fuel exhaust. And I love this concept because there's people out there that do not activate their zeolite. They say that, oh, we're in a pristine area, we're in a clean area. Like there's an Australian product that says we have a pristine mine site for the zeolite. We don't need to activate it. There's nothing in it. But what we've proven is even the mining equipment that's mining the zeolites is putting out diesel fuel exhaust that's being sucked up by the zeolite. So the equipment itself is putting toxins into the zeolite, which would then need to be removed. to maximize its use. So that's really important. So the first thing, the volatile organic compounds come out, and then it starts to oxidize heavy metals and other things, other pollutants that are in there. And over time, we could easily separate the toxins that are trapped in the zeolite. And this is a labor-intensive process of activating the zeolite and removing toxins and heavy metals. Lastly, there's Air Force vacuum filtration, and that gives us our average particle size through glass-fritted apertures of 1 micron, which is, as I said before, 1 micron is 1,000 nanometers, but our smallest particles are down to about 490 nanometers or 0.49 microns, certainly small enough to be absorbed. Okay, so let's talk about what the zeolite actually does, because that is important. We're going to talk about different research that's been done on the zeolite and different things that have been shown in vitro testing and in published data. But understand what happens. You're going to hear a lot of testimonials, and people are going to tell you all the amazing things that this product does. But it's important to understand what it really does. It takes things out of the body that don't belong there, and it does it better than anything we've ever seen. All right, these heavy metals, these volatile organic compounds don't belong in our body, and the Daily Detox Plus takes those out very, very efficiently. Because of that, a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. We have to remember that. So if someone starts asking, we'll remove this, we'll remove that, we'll treat this, we'll treat that. The simple answer is this. It removes toxin and heavy metals from the body, and a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. The main claims of the product are exactly that. Remove toxins and heavy metals, stabilizes immune system function, and helps stabilize pH. Those are the 3 claims that we're allowed to make on the product that we can prove clinically. Everything else is a downstream implication of a cleaner, healthier body. And we can talk about how that works as well. But some of the things I've been asked about is there have been published studies with viruses and clinoptilolate, with cancer and clinoptilolate. And I'm going to preface this with the fact that we are making no claim whatsoever of treating and preventing viruses or treating and preventing cancer. What I'm going to talk about is published data and some proposed mechanisms of where this might help, adjunctive to other things. Okay, so as an example, here we go. Now, when we first looked at this back in the 90s, we were doing HIV research. So we're looking at how HIV got into the cell. And this is true of pretty much all viruses. Viruses have to get into the cell first. So it attaches to a cell receptor on the cell membrane, injects its DNA or RNA, its genetic material inside the cell. It gets taken up by our DNA, and so it hijacks our DNA to make copies of itself. Once it has enough copies of itself, the cell lyses, and all the new viruses go out and basically start infecting other things. So what's interesting, though, is after the virus makes little pieces of itself, makes all the parts of itself, it makes something called viral protease, which snips and cuts all the little pieces so they can fit together. When it snips and cuts those pieces, they take on different charges and different polarities. So they're hydrophobic, water-loving, water-hating, and they have different charges. And then they undergo a process called self-assembly. The virus assembles. It's almost like if I was making a copy of you and I made a head, a torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs, and then gave them each separate charges so they would come together and make a new body. That's how these viruses replicate and assemble. So the viruses themselves are way too big to be absorbed by the zeolite. But there's several publications that looked at both in vitro and in vivo studies that
nutrition specialist and also the vice president for a holistic nutrition
company. Of the zeolite, after viral protease snips these pieces and they're small with a positive charge, some of those pieces can be adsorbed into the zeolite cage and removed. And if that happens during a self-assembly, the virus could be missing parts of itself that are necessary for function. And you think about that, my father used to make fun of me when I was a kid. I had a car that didn't work, and it was parked basically on our front lawn. And I kept talking about fixing it, and it looked like a car. It looked like I should be able to get in and start it. but there was something missing inside that didn't let me start the car and make the car work. I eventually did fix that car, but it took a while. So these viruses, when they self-assemble, could be missing key elements that allows them to be infective, to make copies, etc. And in those published studies, it shows, especially enteroviruses, they're inhibited by the zeolite. But that's because they were primarily looking at the gut and zeolite in the gut, because their zeolite that they were studying was way too big to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So they were looking at things in the gut. But they did show how enteroviruses in the digestive tract could be inhibited in replication with the presence of clinoptilolite. So that was really interesting. And then we have cancer. Lots and lots of things are used to fight against cancer, carcinogens, cancer-causing compounds, things like flavonoids and antioxidants. But what a lot of these are trying to do is tell the cancer to kill itself. So there's two ways for a cell to die. There's necrosis, which is it dies and shrivels up and leaves dead tissue. And there's apoptosis, apoptosis. A lot of people mispronounce it as apoptosis, but the second P is actually silent. It's apoptosis. And apoptosis is programmed cell death. It's the cell knows there's something wrong, and to try to protect our bodies, the cell kills itself. It starts to produce peroxides and things in the cell to eat itself, and then it sends signals out to white blood cells to come and eat the cell, phagocytize it. And the great thing about apoptosis is, for the most part, it's resolution. The cell goes away, there's nothing left. Like in necrosis, there's dead tissue left. With apoptosis, there's nothing left. The cell is completely gone. And so we want to try to induce apoptosis in cells that are cancerous. And we have a lot of different genes in every cell in our body that are called tumor suppressor genes. They're watchdogs. Their job is to try to see if there's something wrong. And if there's something wrong, turn on and tell the cell to kill itself, programmed cell death or apoptosis. So there are several studies looking at zeolites as adjuncts to chemotherapy and radiation in the treatment of cancer. And primarily they were looking at the concept that chemotherapy is toxic. If we could remove some of these toxins post-chemotherapy, we could have better outcomes in the patient. But they found even more was happening. And in one in vitro study, they saw an upregulation of the P21 tumor suppressor gene, which induced apoptosis in those cells. Now, this was an in vitro study. This was a test tube study, but it was really fascinating. And they came up with a mechanism. So understand that the zeolite, I'm looking at my time. Okay, the zeolite, 99% of the zeolite functions extracellularly, outside of the cell, in the blood and the lymph. It travels around the blood and the lymph, and any toxin that comes into contact with it sucks up and removes from the body. The zeolite itself is too big, for the most part, to get into a cell, get into a healthy cell. But if the cell is under a viral attack, it has a leaky membrane, and the zeolite can get into a cell that's replicating viruses. Cancer also is voracious. Cancer needs raw materials to keep building and building, growing more cells. So anything that gets near a cancer cell gets sucked into the cell through endocytosis. So what I imagine is happening, and this is theorized in one of the published studies, is that you have the zeolite going around the body, sucking up toxins, heavy metals, dragging volatile organic compounds with it, and it gets inside a cancer cell. And it's almost like dragging mines to a ship. You know, all these toxins get inside the cell. Once they do, they destabilize the cell, turns on P21 tumor suppressor gene that says something's wrong now, and it kills the cell, which is apropos because the toxins that basically were probably a causative agent or carcinogen that might have caused the cancer could be the same thing that's stopping the cancer in this particular case. So that's the mechanism as they perceive it. As I said, we're not making any claims as a treatment or prevention of cancer, but this is one of the mechanisms that's been published with the research on clinoptilolite. We also talk about pH, balancing pH. Now, pH, if someone doesn't know, if you look at water, pure water has a pH of 7, that's neutral. If you go below 7, it's acidic. Above 7 is basic or alkaline. We are slightly alkaline. Our bodies function best at a pH of about 7.4. Slightly alkaline is known as physiological pH. We have all sorts of mechanisms in our body, primarily by using bicarbonate, H2CO3, to balance the pH of our body. We have these buffering mechanisms, and we screw them up. We screw them up primarily through poor diet, lack of exercise, things like that, which acidify our blood, which makes us more acidic. The problem with that is that our enzymes fold perfectly at alkaline pHs, at slightly alkaline pHs. Once we become acidic, our proteins don't fold correctly, our enzymes don't function correctly, so metabolic processes don't work right, and bacteria, viruses, cancer thrive in acidic pHs. And so we need to get that pH back up. If you've ever even seen a show about doctors, the ER or house, one of the first things that they do when someone comes to the emergency room is they inject bicarbonate. They push bicarb to raise the pH because chances are they have an acidic pH. So we want to try to get that pH back up. Now, the zeolite has several studies with clinoptilolite that show that it acts as a buffering agent. And there's lots of reasons for that. One thing is the heavy metals function as something called Lewis acids in the body and actually function to increase acidity in the body. By removing those heavy metals, that helps balance pH and raise it as well. But also, acidity is caused by protons, this H+, positively charged hydrogen ions. The more positively charged hydrogen ions you have, the more acidic your bloodstream. It's small with a positive charge. Hydrogen ions can go into and out of the zeolite cage. Now, the zeolite does not have a high affinity for the hydrogen ions. They're not going to get stuck in the zeolite cage. But imagine you have an area of your body that's really acidic with a lot of protons, and the negatively charged zeolite cage is floating past it. Some of those protons are going to migrate into the cage. And it's going to balance the pH in that area. And then it gets someplace in the body where there's less protons, they'll migrate out of the cage. So it becomes a geographic buffering agent that helps balance the pH throughout your body. Really fascinating mechanism. So as I said, we've done a lot of clinical studies. We did publish our first few clinical studies as one paper, and that's a published paper looking at healthy individuals. And we followed them for short and intermediate, so 7 days and 30 days at a time. And we saw as much as a 7-fold increase in heavy metal excretion when they used the product. We also wanted to look at people that we knew were toxic, and these were coal miners. We did an 84-day double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical study of West Virginia coal miners. And this was fascinating. We told them to take the product, and we told them how to take the product, but we said, listen, you can put it right in your mouth, you can put it in your drink or your food, but we want you to take it. We want you to be consistent in the way you take it and tell us how you took it. And what's fascinating to me, it didn't matter how they took it, they all got the same benefit. So some people put it right in their mouth, some people put it in their water. This one guy added to his steak every night. He ate steak every night. This one guy had a glass of scotch every night before bed, and he put the zeolite in his glass of scotch. It didn't matter how they took it. They all had the same benefit. And against the placebo control, it's funny because we had what they call a negative placebo response, where all the miners on the placebo said they felt worse. so instead of having a placebo effect where they would feel better, they felt worse, which is fascinating. Now, how do people feel? Well, the generally healthy individuals and even the West Virginia coal miners say 4 basic things when they take the zeolite. They say they have more energy during the day, they sleep better at night, they have better cognitive function, they're thinking clearer, lifts that brain fog. And then most of them said they have better visual acuity, improved eyesight, especially glare recovery and night vision. So it's kind of interesting. And when we're looking at mechanisms, we believe it's because as the liver has less toxins to go through, the liver, we take some pressure off the liver can make more glutathione. Glutathione is produced in the liver, but it's the primary antioxidant for the eye. And so if the liver is healthier, making more glutathione, it can lead to improved eyesight, improved eye function. So that's really interesting. We also looked at electrolyte levels with the use of the zeolite. And this is important because a lot of people are worried if the zeolite is removing metals, will it start removing healthy metals like calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, things like that? Now, there was a large study with animals, ruminants, goats, cows, and sheep, where all these animals had been fed zeolite for years, but they were concerned that it might lower the nutritional status of the animals by pulling out healthy metals. And so half the animals got the zeolite, half the animals didn't, and they all had the same feed. And they found that the animals that had the zeolite actually had higher nutritional status than the ones that didn't. So not only did it not remove the healthy metals, they got better value of the metals from the food they were eating. And again, we believe this is because of competition. If you're taking the heavy metals out that are competing for uptake with the good metals get in. And we've seen that now in our studies as well, where electrolyte levels are balanced. They find no matter how much zeolite you use. So the zeolite's taking out the bad stuff, but not any of the good stuff. We also looked at exercise recovery. This was our largest study to date with over 300 people. And we looked at both weekend warriors, just people that work out every once in a while, as well as competitive athletes. And the competitive athletes really saw an increase in performance, which, an elite athlete knows. You add even a tenth of a second, or take away a tenth of a second in swim time. That's important. But they noticed a better performance, faster recovery. They could work out longer, do more reps when they were using the zeolite. And then we also looked at pH balance. Actually looked at urine, blood, and we did muscle biopsies to show that the zeolite was balancing the pH, raising the pH over time. We've also done in vitro studies looking at things like depleted uranium, which is found in munitions and bombs, to make the bombs heavier. So anybody that's been to war, anyone who's been anywhere where they exploded bombs, is exposed to depleted uranium. And we've done in vitro studies to show the zeolite will pull out depleted uranium, and also volatile organic compounds we talked about before. And we looked at affinities. And if you look at these going up in scale, the biphenyls, the xylenes, the furans, the benzenes, dioxins, formaldehyde, all these are pulled out by the zeolite with increasing affinity. And all of these are highly carcinogenic. And that leads us to the Daily Detox Plus. So as I said, I am a category creator. I created the first colloidal suspension of zeolite back in 2004 and 2005. It was a result of years of research, putting together the initial product. Since then, that product sold well over 4 million bottles. And that company no longer sells my product. Through a series of events, I got all the rights back to my original product. And that's what I'm making for Navan. And I like to tell people, now that you understand toxicity, you understand the food, the water, the air, that we're always exposed to toxins. Once you understand that, you know that everybody needs this product. Every person needs this product. When they learn about it, every person will want this product, and this is the only place to get it. Nobody else has this. I'm telling you, if you look at the competitors, and they said imitation is the finest form of flattery. I'm not flattered. A lot of people try to copy me, but they don't understand how this stuff works. I like to talk about the very first competitor I ever had was a company called Denali, and they made a product called Denali Tox, and they couldn't get it to work right. They started adding different things to it, and I really looked at them as a low-level competitor, because when you took the product, it turned your teeth green, which I always thought was a negative. And when they first launched a product, within weeks, I think 3 to 5 people were hospitalized with aflatoxin poisoning, which caused liver failure. So that product had been pulled from the market. The president of that company had been fired at the time. But most of these people just don't understand zeolite technology, zeolite chemistry, how it works, how to make this product so it can be well absorbed and do everything it's supposed to do in the body. So we do have a recommended dose. We do recommend when you first start it, 10 drops 4 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime. And then after 6 months, you can lower it. After the first month, you can lower it to the maintenance dose, which is 10 drops twice a day. And a bottle is basically a month's supply. We do say repeat the detox dose every 6 to 12 months to kind of clean yourself out. And the reason for this is the zeolite is really, really passive. It goes around the blood and the lymph, pulls out toxin and heavy metals as it travels around the body. It does not go into tissue and rip out toxin and heavy metals. It doesn't do that. But what happens over time, as it removes the circulating heavy metals, is it creates what we call a concentration gradient. More toxins are in the tissue than in circulation, so the tissue will slowly release the toxins in the circulation as you continue to use the product and pull this stuff out, which is why I say every 6 to 12 months, up the dose again and try to clean everything out, kind of do a reset. And that would be the recommendation. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for listening to me all this time, and let's see what kind of questions we have. Okay. So starting at the beginning, someone says they have a friend that has to have an operation for 4 months to remove kidney stones. Would Detox Plus help with that? So it's interesting. Kidney stones are actually formed by oxalic acid. A lot of people think they're formed just by calcium. And it used to be they would say avoid calcium if you're a kidney stone former, but the exact opposite is true. If you form kidney stones, you should increase your calcium intake. 800 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams of a good absorbable calcium daily, like calcium citrate or calcium malate. will help bind some of that oxalic acid and prevent kidney stone formation. You should also go online. You can look for oxalic acid diets to avoid oxalic acids, and that'll lower it. Plus, drink plenty of water to flush that out. In the meantime, because the zeolite can move metals around and actually move calcium, magnesium around the body, it's probably a good idea to use the zeolite. And we have had testimonials from people that were kidney stone formers and found that when they used the zeolite and drank plenty of water, they stopped forming kidney stones or certainly had less kidney stones. Okay, so answer that. What do we need to know about the new vaccine, and can DDP have an effect on it? Okay, so, if they're talking about the vaccine for coronavirus, I mean, there's over 30 vaccines being tested right now. They're all different versions, looking at spike proteins, looking at humoral response, looking at cellular response. So all the vaccines do different things. So we'd have to see which vaccine they actually use. But certainly, I can only say this. I can't make any claim as treatment or prevention of any symptom or disease. I can only tell you a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself, that you have a much stronger immune system while you're using the Daily Detox Plus. And so I would recommend everyone use it, and they're going to be able to, and that's the other thing people reported. I talked about energy during the day, sleep at night, things like that, but people are saying that when everyone around them is getting sick, they're not getting sick when they started using the zeolite. Can the amount of zeolite cause different symptoms? I don't know what you mean by symptoms. I will say this, that a lot of detoxification can cause damage, cause issues. And that's because you're shaking up the body and getting all these toxins out of sequestration. And you have some people call it a wasting syndrome or a detox syndrome. And you get flu-like symptoms. You feel nauseous and exhausted and chronic fatigue. And that's because of those ways of detoxification. For the most part, we don't see that with the zeolite, because zeolite's so passive. It takes a long time over time to constantly remove these toxins. Now, there are people that are highly toxic. Even a little bit of the zeolite is going to start removing toxins quickly. And because of that, they can get some detox syndromes. It's less than 1 in 1,000 people. But should that happen, the worst thing you can do is stop taking the zeolite, because now all this stuff is in circulation. You got to keep taking the zeolite to remove these things. But you have choices. You can either stay at a high dose and remove the toxin as quickly as possible, and it will be uncomfortable for those individuals, or lower the dose dramatically, take 1 drop at a time, a couple drops at a time, drink plenty of water, and see how you feel. And over time, you can raise that dose to remove more and more toxins and do it a little more comfortably. So that becomes your choice in how you want to detoxify. So you're saying organic is more toxic than non-organic? That's not what I said. If you remember what I said, call something organic has to be free of toxins, pesticides, and genetic modification. And the FDA did a study where they looked at fruits and vegetables labeled organic versus fruits and vegetables that were labeled regular. And they found actually more pesticides and herbicides on the organic fruits and vegetables, which simply means that the wind blows and things like that. So I'm just saying, wash your fruits and vegetables. It's the best thing you can do to try and prevent toxins from especially pesticides and herbicides. Just even if you just rinse them off in water, you'll reduce risk of infection by over 90%. But that in that one instance, there are issues with the fact that just because it's titled organic doesn't mean that it doesn't have herbicides and pesticides. Can our detox help some of the damage caused by smoking? Well, certainly, a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. Simply quitting smoking is a really good idea. But if you're healing better, if everything's fixing itself better and detoxing better, then yes, the detox would help. Somebody asked about, will detox help with mesothelioma? I'm not going to go into especially specific cancers. I'm only going to say exactly what I said before. A cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. We've got lots and lots and lots of testimonials from people with a variety of different conditions that did very well using the Daily Detox Plus, the activated micronized zeolite. So I can only say it can hurt, and it's probably going to help. So certainly they should try it. See this. RJ isn't contaminated, remined and processed, and if it is, it doesn't leave toxins in the body. A lot of potential tests by TRS zeolite and ours can be clean enough of mined from outside, which is lab made, and they assume better. Okay, so this is really very distressing to me. So there's a product called TRS zeolite. And if you look at their website, they use a lot of my marketing materials. Even some of the stuff they say comes from me, but they do say they manufacture their zeolite, which boggles my mind because, first of all, it wouldn't be legal to make a synthetic zeolite and sell it to humans for human consumption. That would be considered a new dietary ingredient or drug, which would need to be registered, evaluated for safety by the FDA, and register with the FDA. It's not. They can't make it in a lab and say it's clenoptilolite. They're not allowed to do that. So it makes no sense. Plus, it makes no sense because why would they? Clenoptilolite is highly abundant. Why would they take the time to synthetically manufacture this? And I got to tell you, organic synthesis of or inorganic synthesis of clenoptilolite is kind of tough. It's not easy. You only get a yield of like 4%. So it's not an easy synthesis. It makes no sense that they're actually making this synthetically. And like I said, if they did, it would be an illegal product. And then also, they're the ones that claim that their particle sizes are 0.9 nanometers, which is the size of a single hole in the zeolite.
Nutrition company.
So by definition, wouldn't capture anything. It's just too small to capture anything. So none of their stuff makes any sense. They clearly don't understand the science of zeolites, the science of clenoptilolite. So that's basically what I have to say about TRS. And, if one of their scientists wants to call me and tell me that, I literally wrote the book on this stuff. If he wants to call me and tell me why I'm wrong, I'd love to talk to them, but it just doesn't make any sense. Let's see. Zeolite works only for being dead, not from inhalation. Yeah, you don't inhale our zeolite. In fact, it's a colloidal suspension. Some of it probably gets absorbed in the bulky mucosa in the mouth, but primarily it's absorbed in the digestive tract after you swallow it. It's passively absorbed through the digestive tract. How can the zeolite help with someone with diabetes? That's a great question. So we have lots and lots of people with diabetes that have done really well with the zeolite. And even with balancing their blood sugar levels, lowering their HbA1c. And I had really had to look into this because we just got so many reports from diabetics. So our theory is this. When you look at diabetes, the biggest issue with diabetes is not that there's so much glucose, is that the glucose starts to attach to things. You have so much of it that's circulating in the bloodstream that it starts to basically settle out. And when it settles out, it attaches to the thing that causes all the damage of diabetes. So depending on what it attaches to, it's called glycation or glycosylation. Say it attaches to the blood walls of the blood vessels. That can cause claudication, narrowing of the blood vessels, which can cause loss of blood circulation, which can lead to necrosis, amputation of fingers, toes, limbs, things like that. If it attaches to the nerves, that's diabetic neuropathy. If it attaches to the back of the retina, that's diabetic retinopathy, which can cause blindness. It's actually the leading cause of adult blindness in the United States. So it's not about just high blood sugar. It's about the blood sugar having the ability to start to attach to things. And if you're taking the zeolite is in active circulation, you got to look at glucose. The glucose molecule has a dipole moment. Part of it is positively charged. So we believe what's happening is as the zeolite is traveling around this negative thing, it kind of captures a glucose and drags it along and keeps it moving along, keeps it in circulation. So you can use that glucose over time. So provided that you're really trying to regulate your glucose levels and you're doing what you need to do to maintain or manage your diabetes, we believe what's happening is the zeolite is keeping the glucose in circulation to prevent glycation or glycosylation, therefore reducing the risk of damage from high blood sugar levels. So it's a fascinating mechanism. It has been published. It's just one of the things we found out as we started looking. And we just found out because the testimonials came in and we want to see how is this actually happening. Let's see. How can we check test levels of heavy metals after taking zeolite? So it's kind of weird. There are lots and lots of ways that we measure heavy metals. We did it with urine, blood, and hair. But even then, there's lots of metals that are in sequestration. We have a body burden of heavy metals. So the only real way to find your body burden is cremation, which you can only do once and then measure the heavy metals. Certainly something I wouldn't recommend for the average person. There are sources out there like Doctors Data, Genova Laboratories, where they'll do a urine analysis for excretion of heavy metals. And the concept is if you're excreting a lot of heavy metals, chances are you have a lot of these in your body. And what you can do is do a before test before you take the zeolite, but then months later, do it like 3 or 4 months, do it again, you should see much lower levels of those heavy metals coming off, because now we've removed a lot of the circulating heavy metals. So that's something you can do to try and show what's happening. But like I said, we all excrete at different rates. There's all sorts of things that manage that excretion. So it's hard for me to make one recommendation across the board for testing wasting of heavy metals. Let's see. My dad has stage 2 kidney disease. I need to get him on. Absolutely. That's just someone that says they need to use a product. Residual Lyme disease problems. Okay, so Lyme disease is interesting. Obviously it's caused by bacteria, usually after a tick bite, the Burgdorferi bacteria. So first of all, if you're diagnosed with Lyme disease, you must be on antibiotics. They have to get rid of the bacteria first. What happens, though, is there's endotoxins created by the bacteria that cause nerve damage and cause something called post-Lyme syndrome. That's really a neurologic condition. And it can last for years. Some people have damaged their whole life. There are some things I recommend
this
to try to do to improve nerve function. But the first thing is, as much as you want to do natural things, do the antibiotics first. Definitely make sure you get rid of the Burgdorferi, get rid of the bacteria first, and then start to deal with post-Lyme syndrome. We have had lots of people that utilized the detox and said it had helped improve their post-Lyme syndrome. But we also recommended things that were naturally anti-inflammatory, like fatty acids and things of that nature. So if you have someone that is post-Lyme, I would highly recommend using the Daily Detox Plus, but I could give you a protocol that I would recommend, diet and other things they could do that would help them try to get through it as quickly as possible. Why does Peanut telling me Candida works? Okay, so it actually doesn't, but it's a good question. So Candida is a systemic yeast infection. And the zeolite certainly does not take out yeast. Yeast is way too big, but it does balance pH. And the yeast requires an acidic environment to make sure. So what happens is as pH comes up, it becomes more and more alkaline. It becomes an inhospitable environment for things like yeast, mold, spores, and even bacteria and viruses. With Candida especially, if you have a systemic Candida infection, what we see with people taking the zeolite is you could wind up with oral thrush, which is yeast in the mouth, or a vaginal yeast infection. The reason for that is that there's no place left in the body for this yeast to go. The only place left that's acidic enough for it to survive is the mouth and the vaginal tract. So, of course, I would recommend continuing using the Daily Detox Plus. If it's uncomfortable, you can certainly get over-the-counter products like Nystatin, oral rinse, or things for a vaginal yeast infection to get rid of the last of it. So it doesn't make the Candida worse. It's actually driving it out of your body, but that's what happens when it has no place left to go. Is it safe to take with most medications? Yes. Most medications, like I said, there's a passive product. Most medications will not be removed by the zeolite. There are specific ones I would be concerned about, and they're primarily chemotherapeutic agents. There are cancer-treating drugs, chemotherapies that contain platinum, cisplatin, carboplatin, and the zeolite will pull the platinum out and invalidate or inactivate those drugs. So if you're on chemotherapy, the recommendation, especially if you don't know what you're getting, is stop taking zeolite for a few days before chemo to as much as a week after chemo. But especially if you're taking platinum-containing drugs, you should discontinue for at least a few days before and at least 5 to 7 days after the chemotherapy to make sure you're not invalidating the chemotherapy. Is that live? Wow. Are any clients, patients contraindicated to this product? No, really anybody can take it. I will say this, dialysis patients, things I recommend is making sure to drink plenty of water. And dialysis patients are limited in the amount of water they can take. So the product is easily dialyzed out, so they can use it. But I would recommend sticking to a lower dose because they just can't drink enough water to really get the benefit of the full benefit of the detoxification. So certainly someone who's on dialysis can use it, but like I said, I would stick to a lower dose consistently. Recommended dosage, again, as I said, it's 10 drops 4 times a day is a detox dose. I recommend 4 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime, to spread it out. After the first month or so, you can lower it to what we call the maintenance dose, which is 10 drops twice a day. Could it help colitis? Would it aggravate? Well, colitis is inflammation the colon. Certainly, it works to improve immune system health, which would function to reduce inflammation. So it certainly won't aggravate it. Can it help with vitiligo? You know what? It's kind of interesting. I have vitiligo. I don't know if people have noticed it on my hands. I don't know if you can see it. But in my face, you can see spots in my face. It actually happened because in 2007, 2008, I was on my book tour in Australia, and I got one piece of sushi with bad shrimp. Can you believe this? One piece of sushi. I ate it. I knew it was bad. Within an hour, I had hives all over my body, a violent autoimmune reaction, and I wound up with vitiligo, spots on my face, spots on even alopecia areata, a couple spots that hair won't grow, all because of one bad piece of shrimp. Can you believe that? It's insane. But I will tell you this, I have used the zeolite topically. I've used it, ingested it, and my vitiligo has not gotten any worse. And when I really try, especially when I use it topically, I've measured spots, especially on my hand, that have reduced over time. Vitiligo is autoimmune. Your immune system destroys the melanocytes, the pigment-preventing cells. So the thought is, if you can stop the immune system from further damage, over time, the melanocytes should be able to regrow. But who knows? Me personally, I still have it even after all these years, but it hasn't gotten any worse in a really long time. And I don't know if the zeolite is indeed helping or not. We'd have to do a specific study for that. And cancerous tumors is kidney, adrenal gland, causes extreme blood pressures, ups and downs. Yeah, listen, like I said, it can't hurt. It might help, no matter what it is. If someone has really specific health conditions, I don't mind talking to them. I really need to, see their blood work, see what the doctor's saying, see what the recommendations are, be able to give, proper advice. But across the board, I'm telling you, the product can't hurt and it might help. So they might as well start taking it. If someone's taking tamoxifen, yeah, certainly you can use it with tamoxifen. Tamoxifen is a estrogen receptor inhibitor, so it prevents estrogen positive cancers. So yes, there's no contraindication with tamoxifen and the zeolite. Is safe for someone with liver disease? Absolutely. We just talked about it, actually improves liver function. Recommended dose for babies. So we really can't say it's for babies or for children as a dietary supplement. Anyone with any children, anyone with a diagnosed medical condition needs to consult a physician before using any dietary supplement. But I will say, we've seen lots of parents give it to their children and have done very well. I usually recommend no more than, say, 3 drops at a time for infants to toddlers. As they get up to 5 to 12 years old, they can start using more, 5 to 10 drops at a time. And of course, over 12, they can use even an adult dose. The big recommendation, though, is make sure you're drinking plenty of water, because as you remove these toxins and heavy metals, you can lose water along with it. I'm getting thirsty just from talking. Okay, I promised I would answer as many questions as I could. I'm really out of time. Let's see, is there any restriction on children taking T-tests? I just answered that about children. I feel like educating people about how toxic they are is the greatest factor to overcome. I guess people are asking about recommendation and education. And, I say this all the time, once you understand a product, you know that just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's the right one to use. The example I usually give is ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo biloba is an ancient Chinese tree. Ginkgo sides, ginkgo terpenes, and lactones in the plant can increase oxygen delivery to the brain and the periphery. So it's good for sexual function, it's good for cognitive function, improves brain function. But all of those constituents, the ginkgo terpenes, ginkgo lactones, are in the roots and the stems of the tree. So what happens? You go to the store and there's 100 different ginkgo biloba products, and you're going to buy the cheapest one because it's all ginkgo biloba anyway. Well, that cheap one could be ginkgo bark or ginkgo leaves, and it has none of the actives in it, not a single bit of the actives in it, but you just bought it because it was cheap. So it's really important to make sure that you get a product that's standardized, that's made well, that's made by a reputable company that has science behind it, because that's going to be the one that actually works. It is a shame, and I have friends who are distributors that talk about this. I say that the other zeolite products certainly can't hurt, but none of them are going to be as good as our products. But he says it does hurt because he's known people that used our products at first, switched to a cheaper product, and actually wound up sick, or they were dealing with a condition. that our product helped and the other product did not. And so it's important to try to educate people as much as possible to use a product that actually works and delivers. Let's see. Patrick and Ron to say hi from sunny Alberta, Canada. Sunny Canada. I'm here in rainy Florida. Effects for pregnant women. As I said before, anyone that has a diagnosed medical condition, which includes pregnancy, should consult a physician before using. But as it is, I told you, there was that environmental working group study that found all these toxins were passed on from the mother through the umbilical cord into the baby. So certainly, I would recommend it for pregnant women. It might even help reduce risk for gestational diabetes. And these are the sort of studies I'd like to do over time, but they're harder studies to do, especially with pregnant nursing mothers. If taking certain measures, how does zeolite interact? I don't know what they mean by measures. So Denise Baker, I don't really understand the question. My brother has a piece of scrap metal in his hand for 30 years. Not a good idea. Hard spot around the scrap metal. Stop till you mentioned the spot started soft again. Really, he should have the metal removed from his hand. You said there was a hard spot around scrap metal from using the detox. I really don't know what's going on there. Let's talk offline and I'll see. Oh, certain meds. Well, like I said, there's no, Denise, there's no contraindication with almost every medication. I told you specific ones would be platinum-containing drugs. I already answered that about medications. Can you use zeolite to wash vegetables and fruits? Certainly. Zeolites are used in fertilizers. I actually make an agricultural product that I'm trying to work with farmers now to increase crop yield, to grow faster. It holds water in the soil. It helps exchange cations in the soil so they have better nutrients and less toxins. So there's lots of stuff we're doing with plants. Of course, this is pretty expensive to use as a plant wash, but certainly it couldn't hurt, and it would remove stuff that might not just be removed by cold water. I've heard conflicting information whether zeolite can remove mold or help with kidney. I already answered that question. It removes it because it makes the body healthier and raises pH. High blood pressure in diabetics, especially elder person. Like I said before, I explained how it works in diabetes. Blood pressure is a little different because you're talking about balancing blood volume, and depending on why you have high blood pressure is a symptom, not a disease. There could be a lot of things that it's doing to try to help regulate hypertension. Okay. I'm saying tonight, my daughter has me, and thanks for sharing. I just saying how long should I take it? Okay, how long should you take the zeolite? That's a good question everyone asks me. As long as you're eating, drinking, and breathing, you should be taking the zeolite. The fact is you're constantly being exposed to toxins. You should do things to remove those toxins. As I said, over time, you can take less for a maintenance dose, and every once in a while up the dose to have more of a detox. And of course, if you know that you've been exposed to a lot of toxins, you've gone to a factory or you've gone to China, or so you're someplace inner city where you're breathing in a lot of stuff or exposed to stuff, you can always raise the dose to try and remove that. Will taking zeolite help a heart attack or stroke victim heal more efficiently? Like I said, cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. Certainly, if you have any issue whatsoever, you're going to be healthier when you take the zeolite. Someone else in an anti-estrogen, it can certainly use the zeolite, as I said before, with tamoxifen. Can the detox cause digestive changes? I don't know exactly what you mean by digestive changes. Most of the function of our zeolite is systemic. It's in the blood and the lymph. It's not going to do a lot with the digestive tract, but you're going to be healthier. So you're going to make more of these metalloenzymes and metalloproteins. They're going to help you digest your food. I answered this about Lyme disease already. Oh, someone says their HbA1c went from 6.5 to 5.6. It's fabulous. For those of you who don't know, hemoglobin A1c is an average measure of your blood sugar value over a 3-month period. So it really, if you see your HbA1c come down, it means on average you're controlling your blood sugar. So great job, Trina. Let's see. Does this work for those who have MTHFR? Well, certainly, like I said, anyone who has any condition, even a genetic disorder, you're going to start cleaning stuff out of your body. And a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble answering specific health questions. So if you do have a real specific health question, especially if you have blood work, MRIs, CAT scans, talk to your upline and get to me personally. I'd be happy to go over your stuff, at least explain what's going on. And I spend a lot of time reading people's labs and explaining the labs to them. So I'm so certainly, I'm happy to answer those questions. Maintenance dose, how many months will health first get for one bottle? So basically, the maintenance dose is one bottle. So on the maintenance dose, you'll go through about a bottle a month. On the detox dose, you'll go through almost 2 bottles. We do actually overfill the bottle, so you should get actually closer to 5 weeks out of a bottle, more than a month, because we try to maintain a little higher than a month's supply. But I like to make sure that you're getting at least a month out of a bottle. So if you're on auto ship, you're getting a full month's worth. I've been taking these for 3 months. Several years ago, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea and would stop breathing 91 times per hour. Wow. Last month, I was analyzed again. I only stopped breathing 12 times per hour. I asked the she explained why. She said I must have lost weight. I told her I gained weight during COVID. Roger's coming back after I told her I was taking detox. Can't wait to see what my A1C is. Thanks for the study. Really interesting. It is true that the number one cause of sleep apnea is obesity, and certainly weight loss helps. But there's a lot of other things you could be doing as well. So glad to hear it. Someone already asked me about estrogen inhibitors, and I answered that. Elevated potassium channels levels. Okay, you shouldn't have elevated potassium channels. You can have elevated potassium, and there's potassium-sparing diuretics. So I don't understand why you would have elevated potassium channels. What can happen if someone was taking DDP and not drinking enough water? Great question. So the number one cause of headache is dehydration. And so many times when people say they have headaches, they're just not drinking enough water or getting electrolytes to help hold on to the water. So I tell people to, get there's sugar sports out there once a week, have a sugar-free Gatorade or Powerade to make sure Restore. We're working on some other mineral products that get to the electrolytes you need, and drink plenty of water. But I have had people that tell me my product gave them a headache, or my product, when they took my product a few days, they had cramping in their legs, they were uncomfortable, they got a Charlie horse. All of that is dehydration. So as long as you're drinking plenty of water when you're using the zeolite, and when I say plenty, just like what you should be drinking, 6 to 8 glasses a day for the average adult is enough, but you could drink a little more than that. Certainly, any of these minor side effects are entirely caused by dehydration. What is the shelf life? I know they have just less effect. The fact is, if you store this at ambient temperatures, it's probably good forever. This particular product, I think we put 2-year dating on now. We are doing stability trials to get longer dating. But, we do like you to try to use it as quickly as possible. We don't want people just storing it. But it does not become less effective over time. The mineral in it is thousands of years old and is just as good as the day it was made. So certainly it should be good forever. Could zeolite help if they have strep from an infected incision? Again, bacteria doesn't do well in alkaline pH, so certainly it can hurt and it might help. Safe for pregnant nursing, I answer that yes. Someone asked about I just changed it again. Nicaragua has lots of volcanoes. That's great. Radiation in the body. So one of the uses of the zeolite, of clinoptilolite, was right after Chernobyl, they dropped 3 tons of clinoptilolite on the reactor site to cap the reactor and prevent further radiation from getting out. They also distributed bags of clinoptilolite zeolite all around Russia and Ukraine, and even into the Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and had people use the zeolite to cook with. They made biscuits out of it and cookies because they found the zeolite would pull out radioactive cesium and strontium fallout from the Chernobyl reactor. There also was a really great study done in goats, milk goats, where they fed them high doses of clinoptilolite, and they saw a 15-fold increase in the excretion rates of radioactive cesium and strontium. So certainly, if you have radioactive components in your body, most of those are going to have high affinity for the zeolite and be able to be pulled out by the zeolite. Let's say, when can you encounter post-line protocol I speak of? Contact your upline. All the upline, the leadership has my direct contact information. I don't want to give it out in the webinar, but certainly they can get my email or put together a 3-way call, and I'd be happy to speak to you. Safe for all ages, yes. Okay, I'm going on. Are we expanding to other countries? That's not my call. I would love to be in other countries. I have sold the Zeolite in over 30 countries previously with previous companies. So it would be really great for Navan to open up globally. Is it possible for daily intakes to help with arthritis, and what daily intake should they take? Well, it really depends. I mean, arthritis is, there's osteoarthritis, which is simply a loss of cartilage over time. Rheumatoid arthritis is autoimmune. It does function as an immunomodulating agent because it improves immune system health. So anyone with an autoimmune condition should feel a little better when they're taking the detox. Of course, they should be doing other things for their condition. So all that being said, again, it can hurt and it might help. Can detox bother your stomach, especially someone with an ulcer? It shouldn't. This does have a acidic pH, which is funny because it does raise pH. So the average pH of the Zeolite is about, of the Daily Detox Plus is between 4.5 and 5.5, but it shouldn't hurt an ulcer at all. You know, it's just not enough to do that. Does it help with diverticulitis? Again, with inflammation, it'll help a little bit. But if you have diverticulitis, you should know what foods you should eat and stay on top of that because it can lead to diverticulosis. Alopecia zeolites, I already mentioned that with vitiligo, my own alopecia. Again, as an autoimmune condition, it might help. Same thing with psoriasis and rheumatoid arthritis, they're autoimmune conditions. Detox help with vertigo. So vertigo is kind of interesting too. Vertigo is usually caused by some problem with the inner, which could be genetic, it could be circulatory, it could be Meniere's disease. So it really depends on what's wrong with it. Again, anytime people ask me all these different medical conditions, I'm going to say that a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. Taking the Daily Detox Plus is certainly not going to hurt, and it might help with any of these issues. Okay. I already talked about children's dosing. Gave a couple of drops to my dog, and my husband complained she was too active and told me to stop. That's funny. Certainly helps with the animals. Okay, so hypothetical, if there was not enough heavy metals toxin in the body, could some of the good metals ultimately be removed because they weren't kicked out by the bad? I'm going to say it's a highly hypothetical question because it just is not possible. We are so toxic that there's never going to be a time when the zeolite is going to run out of high affinity metals to be removed. It's just not going to happen. And like I said, with the animals, that huge study they did with the ruminants, they actually saw higher nutritional status in those animals because by removing the toxins, the good food, the good nutrition they were eating was getting into their body. So the zeolite function as a nutritional enabler. So it's just not going to happen. How long does a product last in bottle? We talked about that. I answered. Okay. I took zeolite in small dose while pregnant, exclusively breastfeeding, doing daily detox to restore my prenatal stuff. Good. Thank you. You're brilliant. Thank you, Denise. What specific lab tests are your test heavy metals in the body? I talked about that before. You can, Doctor's Data, Genova Labs. They use ICP-MS, intercoupled plasma mass spectroscopy, which is okay, but does tend to overreport arsenic and underreport cadmium. But there are some things you can do from some of those labs. How much can I give to my dog for autoimmune issues? The dogs, I probably put, 5 or 10 drops in their water, and that's probably plenty for a dog. Okay, I answered all the questions, and it's going on an hour and a half. So I did say I would try to be as specific as possible. This is being recorded, so we will be able to see it later. Okay, so people are now asking more questions. I'm really out of time, but thank you so much for listening. This is now the deep dive into detoxification. I hope I answered all the basic questions of the concept of detoxification, what we can do. I do make myself available, so talk to your upline if we need your 3-way calls. And I will try to do more of these webinars, maybe shorter sessions to answer specific issues, especially now that we've now relaunched and we've launched into Navan. As Navan grows, we'll do some more clinical research and some more in vitro and in vivo studies. And as we do that, we make all that information available to distributors. So guys, thank you so much for your time. I hope it was informative. Have a great night. Thank you.